Welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Join us every Wednesday to learn about the latest cutting-edge developments in the real-time communications industry. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSWITCH Solutions. Get support and professional services directly from the creators of the FreeSWITCH open source project, solving your issues in the most efficient, stable, and scalable way possible. Get the FreeSWITCH advantage. Visit freeswitch.com. Also brought to you by ClueCon, the premier technology conference for developers by developers. Join us every summer in Chicago. ClueCon kicks off on Monday with our annual hackathon, The Coder Games, followed by 3 days of technology-rich presentations discussing telecom, WebRTC, and IoT from developers around the world. To learn more, visit ClueCon.com or call 877-74-CLUE.
And welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Today is the 27th of June, and this week we're going to be joined by Luca. And sorry, Luca, I'm not even going to say your last name because I'm just going to murder it. Luca's joining us all the way, I believe, from Italy today, and he's going to be talking about Adhearsion. If you guys don't know Luca and Adhearsion's a voice control framework, works with FreeSWITCH, works with Asterisk, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's written in Ruby. And Luca was I think guy number 3 with Mojo Lingo there with Ben and Ben over there. So you guys hang out for just a few minutes. He's going to be joining us, and he's got a few things to show us. Before we get there, hey Josh, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, good afternoon, Ken, and hello there to the ClueCon Weekly community there. If you have any questions during the call here, please comment in the YouTube channel, the HIP chat, or the IRC channels, and we will be sure to get your calls answered during the interview here. And so this year at ClueCon, it will be July 23rd through July 26th. And you can register at ClueCon.com. So be sure to take advantage of our June flash sale here. We have a CC 2018 last chance. Get yourself $400 off on your registration. And this ends tomorrow at midnight. And we have another sponsor this year. We have Aperion at Aperion.io. Aperion is a platform that provides useful communication products to the businesses of all types. They deliver reliable pay-per-use services supported by intuitive graphical user interfaces and great APIs, as well as amazing customer support. And so check out our Coder Games at ClueCon.com. We would love to have you come and join us for the Coder Games on Monday at ClueCon. And we will have 4 games at all levels of participation. And we have something for everyone, from the extreme technical to the people just starting out, for those who are really not technical at all. Come join us for the all-day Coder Games. And we are excited to have James Bodie back this year with Dangerous Demos on Wednesday afternoon at ClueCon. You can sign up by emailing Sharon at freeswitch.com. And be sure to check out ClueCon.com for the latest updates on speakers and the scheduling and our nightly activities. Basically, every night of ClueCon, we do have an activity available, so you can get your social networking in and get to know some of the top-tier individuals of various companies that will attend. And FreeSWITCH Solutions is now offering live virtual training. You can learn basic FreeSWITCH operations from the comfort of your own home or office. Email training@freeswitch.com for more information. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes you would like to see, please email us at marketing@cluecon.com, where we will continue to add instructional videos periodically. Make sure you check back regularly for updates. As usual, be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to click that little bell for notifications. Back to you, Ken.
All right, thank you very much, Josh. So this week, guys, we're gonna have Luca, Luca joining us, and we got Mike Malbrutus. He's joining us all the way from the UK this week. He's at ComCon. So, Mike, Luca, how are you guys doing?
Great.
Wonderful. So as you can see behind me, we have the ComCon stage. It's actually after hours, but there's been some really great things. And it's always wonderful to be in the UK. So, Luca, you're coming to us from Italy.
Yes, currently in Italy. So I've been traveling a lot last few months because, stuff's happening all times. So yeah, Italy. I'm enjoying the beautiful summer here and writing some code. I'm actually learning Golang.
Oh, Go is a great language.
Yep.
So, what's new in the world of voice XML?
So voice XML itself is an interesting question. So we don't do much in the way of voice XML, but instead of that, we propose people use Adhearsion, which is actually not the newest framework on the block. Adhearsion was created in 2012, I would say, around that, probably by team of Jay and Jason, and then picked up by the bands. And it's a call control framework. So if you'd like to know more, I can just get started with the presentation.
Sure. Don't we?
Cool. So, I'll give you some intro about Mojo Lingo later, but it's so the XML dial plan in FreeSWITCH is very cool. You do a lot of things with it. You can do a lot of other things, adding adding all the stuff like mod XML curl or just calling curl inside the dial plan and other things. But as soon as you start factoring in things like calling an API using ASR, complex IVR trees, and in general complicated call control, it gets more and more complicated to get around to do stuff that really works like you want it to. Our idea when we started was to make it easier for everybody to be able to build complex and interesting voice applications. How did we do it? With Adhearsion. So there's other options with FreeSWITCH. Like you can use Lua, you can use JavaScript, you can use an HTTP API, you can do mod XML curl, you can do the command line. We have a couple places where Adhearsion was too complex, simple use case, where we're just running FS CLI through. While I will not add that for complicated options, it certainly helps getting things done. But I will use Adhearsion if I were you. Would you use Adhearsion? So Adhearsion is a Ruby voice application framework. It's a third-party call control type of thing. So it doesn't touch media. It will just handle your calls and put them through the you can answer and transfer, play back audio, gather input, and everything you can do with Ruby, really. Connects to FreeSWITCH through Mojo. Mojo is an XMPP-based standard that allows you to build different kinds of nodes that connect to FreeSWITCH through XMPP. It's also useful outside of Adhearsion, but we're going to Rio for Adhearsion. We've had version 2 for the longest of times, and version 3 has been stuck at RC1 for a while. It works pretty well, but I'll get to why we haven't released yet soon. It's backed by a foundation, so you can be sure the project is never going away. It's a non-profit, but we do have enough resources to get back to things running correctly. So Adhearsion 3 takes out some of the stuff that are in Adhearsion 2. Adhearsion 2 supports ESL, so the event socket interface for FreeSWITCH. Adhearsion 3 doesn't, mostly because, I'll be honest, RubyFS, the underlying library we've been working with, has got a lot of problems with modern Ruby versions, and essentially we ended up deciding not to pursue that avenue anymore because Rio is really good. Asterisk 11 or plus is required if you're using asterisk. We streamlined the internals a lot. The dependencies are almost halved in number. It's got a built-in HTTP server, so you can control your FreeSWITCH instance and make things happen through a normal HTTP interface. And it's got native internalization support, which means that it's as easy as translating the strings in a web application. You can translate your prompts in an IVR or general voice application. There's a plugin architecture that provides a lot of moving parts. Itself, Adhearsion is built out of a couple internal plugins. And we have voicemail, we have pseudo TTS. With pseudo, I mean that if you don't have any TTS engine, so text-to-speech ending available, there's a plugin that will say numbers, dates, and that's it, I think, numbers and dates, and months and years in various ways. So you can have 1052 or the second or things like that. There's some small words in pseudo TTS, and also an interesting call queue, which is used by a lot of, I will say at this point, large call centers. There's a plugin that will provide Asterisk with some extra platform-specific functionality, which is needed on Asterisk because Rio does more things than Adhearsion by itself on FreeSWITCH. So you need to equalize functionality. It's got unified logging, so you can run it in Docker. It will just output to standard output, or you can do whatever you need. You get clustering via Rio, so you can have multiple Adhearsion instances driving multiple FreeSWITCH servers, which is very important because we used to generally deploy Adhearsion in a one-to-one configuration. So one Adhearsion process, one FreeSWITCH server. But of course, that doesn't scale really well, and it ends up having you, as the application developer, having to load balance stuff around that. So it's better if you can just run in cluster configuration. And you can also do deployments using Ruby standards. We have applications that are running on Heroku. We have applications that are running inside Docker on any kind of host. We have one application. I personally run one application that's running on Amazon ECS, so serverless container. It's just Ruby, so anything that can run a Ruby process can run an Adhearsion application, which has been important in getting processes deployed easily. Every call is an actor. So Adhearsion, just a little bit of how Adhearsion works. It's pretty easy. It's just Ruby. Anybody that has done Ruby or Rails, especially Rails, will find themselves right at home because essentially we try to mimic some of those constructs, mostly for the newer people coming in. So there's a controller ID, there's an ID of a controller. We have a routing layer that will send a call to this or that controller. We have models. There's ways to connect Adhearsion to a database or Redis or any kind of story, HTTP comes to mind, or a queue like RabbitMQ. Messages are passed between the engine of the actors using Celluloid. So it's using the Celluloid library inside, which is pretty high performance as far as Ruby goes. Unfortunately, it's not great in the context of, let's say, higher performance data structures and higher performance throughput. I'm sure people will say that later. So it always happens. Of course, if this were written in Golang, it will be much faster. But of course, Ruby has trade-offs, such as what you see on the screen is a complete Adhearsion application. So there's so much magic going on in there that you can fire up stuff around a simple controller, but at the same time, if you need something quick, it's very simple and it's faster than writing it in Dialplan. I've thrown around the Rio word a couple times, so maybe it's worth knowing what Rio is. Rio is an XMPP third-party call control protocol, which has essentially uses the XMPP stanzas to convey voice app primitives such as, again, say or speak or play or answer or transfer or other stuff. It's got a full first-class citizenship in FreeSWITCH through Mod Rio, which was written by good old Chris Rienzo, and it's a very interesting way of handling things because you can also use that very XMPP identity the FreeSWITCH server has to manage other events or do presence, so you know whether your FreeSWITCH servers are up and what they're doing. We've done some interesting stuff with that in the past. XMPP has fallen a little bit out of fashion as of late because people have started just coming up with different protocols and newer things, and Slack basically took over. But I still think there's a place for open protocols and stuff that people can actually see how they work as opposed to just convenience. So that's where this sits. Of course, you can do anything, calls, you can do speech and TTS, you can do call mixing. So you can turn two calls into a conference and then add more streams. You can play audio, you can play video into a conference, and everything you can do with FreeSWITCH, you can do through Rio and XMPP. So what we've been doing with Adhearsion, literally the kitchen sink. Adhearsion has been used to build, I would say, anything that can be built around telephony. I've seen people running things that were not telephony based on Adhearsion, but I will not advocate that. In general, we've done everything from calls to conferences, internationalized media, driving GRXML and SSML. So going back to your original question about voice XML, we do use a subset of it to define the interactions with users, but we don't. Adhearsion doesn't do voice XML proper. Actually, that would be an interesting topic of discussion from some panel one day, because there's an entire enterprise world that is still using voice XML and CCXML, and they're stuck with large and old commercial platforms. There might be a space there to build something that those companies will be eventually interested in using. So let's leave that there for now. We built complex IVRs, anything from something you can call and tell it your newspaper didn't arrive today, and it will go to the database, check if you're actually subscribed, check if they can still schedule a redelivery, ask you when it's okay to redeliver, give you the time, put the time in the database, and automatically schedule the delivery. All of that is done through Adhearsion. So you got your paper at 4 because you said at 10 a.m. you notice your paper is missing. You call the company and you got your paper by 4 in the same day. API call, database access. You're not really limited to dial plan applications. You can do even dial out. You can do just call control. So it's not necessarily something you dial in or you get dialed from and get dropped into a dial plan. How do we generally deploy this? As I said, any Ruby flavor. It's usually one with FreeSWITCH if you're not doing clustering, as I said, but I advocate doing clustering if you can. It's a 12-factor Ruby process. You can really run it on anything. Oh yeah, I forgot LDAP. If people out there really need to use LDAP, you can use LDAP. And the other interesting implication about XMPP, if someone is using XMPP or an XMPP compatible gateway as their company messaging service, it can be connected to your PBX essentially through Adhearsion. So you can have messages posted for someone that got a call. You have a call, you got a message on your chat. There's plenty of stuff that you can do, and we've done all of that with Adhearsion at some point. And there's some large call centers still running those platforms. So just to take a quick look, this is a dial plan. It's like a board with nails stuck in it. It's great. It's simple to build. There's nothing to manage. But when it gets complicated, it gets really complicated really quickly, to the point where there's really no real reason to go further into complexity. And you start spinning out parts of your dial plan to Ruby, to other applications, to stuff that's not really great. But you do it through HTTP or other methods, and you end up having a patchwork system. So what you do is just drop into a Ruby process that is like the world's largest Swiss knife, pictured in the slide. You can do literally anything with a Ruby system. Of course, that comes with trade-offs. When you have to do an IVR that's got 2 entries, one of them goes to an agent and the other goes to record a message and hang up. There's no point in firing up Adhearsion. So we do that. Like I am so used to using Adhearsion that I generally just go for it. But of course, I don't advocate people doing everything with the same tool, because that's wrong. But generally speaking, when you start approaching the level of complexity, like you have an IVR that's got 4 or 5 entries, one of them needs to hit an API, another checks for opening times, that kind of stuff, then you start realizing that a simple Ruby controller solves most of your problems at a smaller time investment. What did we build with this? Hyper-compliant phone system. They got both a PBX, so they got calls incoming and calls going out so this is used for reminder calls. It will call you and tell you that you have an appointment with the doctor at 9 a.m. tomorrow. This is interesting. This is the start of a current project that we're now doing for a different client that is really interesting. Mojo built this surgical room streaming around an interesting piece of hardware that was forced to be used because that hardware was already certified. So they could not change that. That's a interesting, I would say, homebrew type of thing. So they built about 30 of them. That it's a camera that will dial into a SIP server. It only does that, which is pretty interesting. And it does through SIP. So we use Verto to have WebRTC people calling in or calling in through SIP, so they can just listen. There's no video on the SIP side. And the SIP camera would just dial in and transmit to whoever is connected to the same room. In this particular case, adhesion was needed mostly to control access. So people cannot just, dial a number or dial an extension or join a web page and see a surgical operation happen. Surgery is not, it's a private thing. So it's very important that there's a very strict access control on that. This involves calling out APIs, two-factor control, that kind of stuff. And this is really, really a good use case for adhesion. At this point, it's better to use adhesion than not to. So the user authenticates through the browser and then goes to Adhearsion, which checks that the token the user is sending is valid through the API. This way, you're sure that nobody is allowed even near the system before the authentication is complete, and you're certain that person is who they say they are. Well, we built, the delivery accounts, complaints, and services system, which I talked about earlier. We built an MVNO, which someone very close to work, to FreeSWITCH, used to work at that company. And hello, Evan. And this is interesting, a cultural mediation network with online translation. So people in the Italian government speak languages. Some of them speak what's called a rare language. So maybe they speak Urdu or some Chinese dialect. And they get a client on their phone or on their browser where they get a call from the police. So we have a web page where the police can go and call someone speaking one of those rare languages, and the system will determine who's on call, reach out to them through the various channels, and get them on the phone with the police or in the hospital so they can understand what a person in distress is actually saying, which is, and it's quite well received, and it's been used a lot in the last years. This project is interesting because it's how I got started with Adhearsion, it's how I got started with Telephony, and it's probably how I got started with Ruby, all at the same time. Like, I got tasked with building that project without having done much of either. So no Ruby, no Telephony, and no Adhearsion. So that's a project I really like remembering about, and it still works. It's 8 years old, hasn't been updated much, but it does what it should do. So it's just great. So what's happening with Adhearsion? I remember promising us releasing Adhearsion 3 almost 2 years ago. That's my fault for the most part. Project was recently revived for good. We got some sponsorships coming in from companies that are using Adhearsion. We got renewed interest with some people committing to the repo and giving us renewed interest. And also, one crippling dependency problem was solved after almost 1 year with Nokogiri, allowing us to finally upgrade all dependencies. So we're just going to through the motions of upgrading all dependencies on all gems and rated, and removing support for all versions of Ruby below 2.2 for the same reason. And this time we are releasing Adhearsion 3 by ClueCon. Probably before that, but I'm saying ClueCon, so I still have a month to go. Remember to register for ClueCon, by the way. My talk is going to be awesome, and all of the others. So what have you done? What else have we done with Adhearsion and in general? Mojo Lingo has built two separate projects that require a hybrid MCU and SFU system. Someone might remember my talk at ClueCon. We changed that architecture slightly since. Using Adhearsion, we're using Janus with FreeSWITCH, and instead of going through a SIP adapter, so using FreeSWITCH to call Janus via SIP, we simplified the architecture a lot by just using Verto on one side. So we have a Ruby process that presents itself as a browser speaking Verto on the Janus side, and as a browser speaking Janus signaling on the FreeSWITCH side. Essentially, what this does is just translates the two signalings and then just sends the correct SDP to each side. Granted, this has some media limitations. There's no transcoding, so we're forced to make sure that any media stream that's sent on one side is understood and usable by the other side, but that has never been a big problem. This works very well and is going in production in a matter of weeks. We had a different project going on that required doing something similar, and we decided to go a different route to see if we could further simplify the architecture. Given that in this particular project, as opposed to the other, we had the ability to allow for smaller video feeds. Sometimes the project where we're using Janus actually requires all video feeds to be in very good quality, so it's not possible to do what you're doing here. But this other project never uses video in a larger than, I would say, 480 format. So what we did here is we're using a canvas element to copy part of the video. This is something that when we had the idea and started experimenting with, started feeling like it was a bad thing to do. But it turns out that performance-wise, on Chrome and Firefox, it's actually lighter than spinning up 2 calls, one to an SFU and one to an MCU, such as Asterisk or Janus, and essentially results in having the best of both worlds. So we have one virtual call that's actually going to FreeSWITCH with the multiple videos that is then split into small squares with each of the videos, like you see in my screenshot, by JavaScript in the page. There's just one video flow, one recording, one of everything. Granted, this has some limitations. Again, size of video, you have to confirm to whatever the square size is, and if you make those bigger, it immediately show they're just small chunks of video. And the other problem is that this is just being only an MCU means we're forced to keep the layouts always the same. So FreeSWITCH provisions for some interesting things, such as the second screen, such as speaker detection, such as listener only calls. So we work around that using the FreeSWITCH features, and this is working really great. Also, some of these things will be solved by SignalWire. Cool. So my more or less last example, streaming one-to-N. This is going to be my ClueCon talk. So I just put out a little teaser out there. HLS, RTMP are great, but they're very slow and they're out of sync, which means that if you're doing real-time events for a classroom, such as the teacher putting out a question, doesn't work to use HLS and RTMP because you either hear the question, but you don't have the form on your screen, or you see the form, but the question has not come out yet. On top of that, those videos are not in sync with each person. So I could be seeing something and you could be seeing something that's a minute later because of how they work. So we're just using WebRTC in this particular project. We're using FreeSWITCH as a distribution network. So FreeSWITCHs call each other to essentially spread out the bandwidth usage and also the CPU usage. And this gives things to very close to real time with just, I don't know, maybe a second or two of delay, which is more than enough. But there's more in this in ClueCon, including the other scenario where we're using HLS and RTMP to stream sports events to FreeSWITCH, which is something we just started building. Oh yeah, this is just a slide I put in. One thing we're doing with Adhearsion. So this is interesting because it's a complicated use case. These people need Arabic speech recognition. There's an interesting issue with both support and quality. So ASR in Arabic is neither great, not very supported. There's really only Google Voice that does a decent job, and even then it's not great. So right now we're doing record and post. Async Google Cloud Voice will come with, it will be available in SignalWire, I will say. There is no other module that does that. But anyways, and we record and post it, and then essentially the transcriptions are quickly checked to a retranslation in English, which sounds weird, but works because we're detecting some specific words. This is about shipments. So this is the kind of thing that Adhearsion makes easier because you got a recording, you post it to Google Voice, you got something back, you have to translate it, then check it against the list of words. If one of the words is present, the message is marked as green. If one of those words is not present, the message is marked as red. Why are we retranslating to English? Because apparently Arabic has the same word for 5 different things, and it works better to retranslate back than just go through Arabic. I don't know Arabic, so it's been pretty interesting for a journey, and also showcases how sometimes you just need something more powerful than just a dial plan. Well, thank you. This is the Mojo Lingo is a company I worked on for many years, and there's some new exciting things coming on the horizon for both Mojo and myself, but this is myself. So anything I can help you with, just let me know, and I'm here to answer.
So, Luca, tell us about the history of. Tell us about the history.
History of Mojo Lingo or the history of Adhearsion in general? So Mojo Lingo both. So Mojo Lingo started out with Ben Klang, who everybody knows is the tall guy with a hat, and he started doing telephony services and consulting, and picked up Adhearsion almost immediately. And right after picking up Adhearsion, in the sense of using it, when Jay and Jason Gecky were still part of the project, he started working with Ben Langfield, the other Ben, the British guy, and they they worked together for a while. Then at roughly the same time that Ben Langfield had joined, I actually, as I said, I started working on both Telephony, Ruby, and Adhearsion at the same time. First of all, I implemented a half-baked, bug-ridden version of Adhearsion myself before finding the framework. That thing is horrible. I still have the repo somewhere, but I made it private because the code is so bad. Then I found Adhearsion itself, and that really simplified things. And it was around Adhearsion 0.6.8. And after a couple commits, and after a couple open source type of things, so I was helping out, I was testing things. I think at the time I was really just one of the, if not the only user, one of the biggest users of Adhearsion, because we had many projects going on. And Ben just asked me to join up, so I was the third person to join Mojo back in 2008 or 9 or 10. Well, I don't even remember. Probably 2010, yeah, because my daughter had just been born, so 2010. And no, 2009, because my daughter is born in 2009. Sorry, wife. And anyways, after that, we started picking up steam and building many other projects, and working with Voxeo, which led to the development of Voxeo, which was originally built out to work with XMPP and the Prophecy server, and with Voxeo that later was acquired. Then they became Tropo. There's a long story there too, but it's their story. And after that, we decided we'd branch out into more of a open source role by building Rio, so we could have FreeSWITCH to run applications against, while commercial users will use Prophecy, which I don't even know if still exists or not. So in the end, the original use case for Rio is no more, but we still have the FreeSWITCH use case, which right now is more important. We built a lot of interesting applications over the year, large call centers, an entire MVNO, WebRTC stuff. WebRTC actually started out in, I would say, 2 or 3 years ago with the web streaming project. So with the surgical room streaming project. We've been all dabbling in WebRTC for a long time, but as you know, WebRTC hasn't really been ready until, I would say, 2015. People will contradict me, but that's not true. Like, yeah, we've been able to build good WebRTC applications for a couple years at this point, in my opinion. Then some applications were working great before.
It didn't really become mainstream.
No, and yeah, browser support was really not there. Again, you could probably build something working even 5 years ago, but it would only work in 2 browsers out of 100, and even in those, it will crash a couple times every session. So right now, we're at the point where WebRTC is becoming more and more relevant, to the point where most of Mojo Lingo's projects are WebRTC based at this point. Not all of them. We have a very large telephony project going on right now, but for the most part, it's just WebRTC. So that's it essentially. Then we grew. We have more people. There's an office in Italy. There's an office in Atlanta, and yeah, as I said, there's exciting news on the horizon with Cellular Wire coming up, and us joining the team in some capacity. And there's plenty to do and plenty to see. And we have many customers around the world. Recently acquired one in Asia, which is the first one we have, and it's been a long journey, and it's been very satisfying.
So what are the challenges of running this type of project for such a long period of time?
So let's take the oldest example that we have, which is the translation network. Main thing there at some point, really depends on the type of client that you have. A government client at least will keep paying the bills. So they will. You can just have a support, agreement. So from let's say company standpoint, it's easy. It's harder with private customers. Sometimes people don't want to pay for upgrades. Just explain the system is going to stop working, and they usually just agree to it. But from the technical standpoint, which is the most interesting part, it really depends on how complicated the application is. If you have a large web facing front, like this translation network has, which has an entire website you can register to, it's got a management interface. Actually, shockingly, you need to be aware of keeping that side upgraded the most, because web is going to provide you with the widest attack vector. So people are going to try to get in from there. At this point, one important thing that I've noticed is that you need to be very good at documenting stuff, even just the operational stuff. Because we have a couple projects that built by people that are no longer at Mojo that took hours to figure out how to upgrade once something had happened or how to keep them running. Telephony tends to run by itself, so it seldom requires intervention. So as you certainly know, when something breaks, it's broken. It's rarely a glitch. Like when an IVR stops working, it's very, very rarely something that only happened once. It has stopped working, generally speaking. So the challenges are in documentation for a long time. If you have a project running for 8 years continuously, used by hundreds of people, you need to have procedures written down for the most common occurrences, and you have to have a very, very comprehensive set of tests, which is interesting because that application was born without any kind of testing built in, and it was actually built almost 2 years after it went into production. We sat down and worked through the entire thing and built an entire set of specs, so we were sure that things will keep working even through upgrades and modifications. So you need documentation, you need tests, and you need someone to listen on the customer side, which is not always the case, as everybody sure knows. Many people will just tell you, if it's working, don't touch it. And since you still have a service agreement with them, you don't really want to do that. You want to keep them running because otherwise you end up running the risk of things just stopping working. So documentation and tests and someone to listen to you, which is the hardest part. Also, documentation is the hardest part. People never write documentation unless you ransom them and blackmail them for days. It's how developers work, and but that is how we kept those long-running projects running. People say there's always someone that knows how they work, even if they're not the original authors.
So the new version's going to be in Go?
Adhearsion version? No. I'm just doing some Golang stuff for. Yeah, we're actually right now. Adhearsion is written in Ruby. It will keep being in Ruby because Ruby has unparalleled. The magic that you get from Ruby is ideal for writing rich telephony applications because you don't need to worry about boilerplate as much. So Adhearsion has a niche that is that. I'm working on Golang more for the lower level, high throughput, simple applications. So if you have an application that's running a lot of small calls, Adhearsion is not the best tool. Adhearsion is the best tool when you have an application that is running a moderate number of highly complicated interactions. So what I'm branching out into is learning Golang so I can supplement Ruby with spinning out and writing some of the lower end signaling in Go, including one of the things that I want to rewrite is the Janus to FreeSWITCH component that's currently written in Ruby, and of course it's standing up because that application doesn't do thousands of calls per hour, but eventually it will. And rather than figuring out how to scale that, it's probably better to just switch to something that will run a couple 100,000 transactions per hour itself, so I don't have to worry about reinventing an entire scaling architecture. So Golang is not for Adhearsion is one thing. Golang will be used for things where Adhearsion is less suited for, and I feel like I don't have that kind of tool in my arsenal. So I like to be prepared for anything. So even if I never become a Go expert, I can drive some other developer as a team leader to go through the correct things to build something in Go, and I can speak their language. So even if I need to learn enough Go to build a prototype and then talk to someone who already does Go without problems. So that's how I feel the role of a lead engineer should be. You can write your own code. You need to write your own code. People that stop coding end up being bad leaders, in my opinion. Sorry if anybody's done that, but it feels like to me that you need to keep your hands in. But at the same time, sometimes you just need enough understanding of a domain, especially if your specialization is somewhere else. So Go will be for things that the Adhearsion doesn't do well.
So, what can you speak about, like? Okay, so the properties of Ruby, right? And then there's a mix between Ruby and Rails, right? How does that?
Oh yeah. For the longest time, people have equaled Ruby with Rails because I think it's one of the few examples where a framework drove adoption of language. No matter what the Ruby purists say, it's what has happened. So people had never used Ruby before Rails came out. Never, as for some definitions of never, like, of course, people were using Ruby before, or there would not have been any Rails. But the Rails drove adoption of Ruby so much that eventually people started hiring Ruby and Rails developers. So there was no Ruby developers. They were all Ruby and Rails, which is one of the reasons why I started working with the bands at Mojo, because I probably am one of the 5 people that learned Ruby not from Rails. I only started using Rails, I would say, 3 or 4 years ago, which is a full 5 years after starting to work in Ruby, because I never actually needed it, and I never did much in the way of pure web application development. So Ruby provides you with a complete set of magic methods. Polymorphism, it's got class reopening, it's got monkey patching, it's got a good way to define domain-specific languages, which is what we're doing in Adhearsion. So it's very easy to build a language that conforms very well to telephony. So you can just say, answer, play this file, ask for 1 digit. If the 1 digit is 4, do this. If the 1 digit is 6, do this other thing. If it's something else, say, I did not understand, and repeat the menu. It's very easy to build that in Ruby. And that's, of course, mutated from the work that's been done in Rails. So for the longest time, Rails and Ruby were intertwined. Right now, I think we're sitting at a point where there's more separation. People are doing interesting things in Ruby that are not Rails, though I think Ruby developers that do Rails are like the 80% of the population still. But Rails is a web framework that drove adoption of Ruby in the world. Ruby is a beautiful language that has very interesting constructs and very interesting ways of handling DSLs at one trade-off. Ruby is slow. I know there's some talk about the new Ruby, JRuby 9000 runs on the JVM, is very quick. There's other interpreters like Truffle that run very fast. But the reality is that all of those have library compatibility problems. So maybe they run fast if you're crunching numbers, but if you need that one XML parser that you've been using all the time, there's no extension for that. You're stuck with the C Ruby version, which is called MRI. That thing is great. It's amazing. We built an entire word out of it. But Ruby is, compared to other languages, Ruby is slow. That's the only problem Ruby has. So in some regards, you do need to be prepared to spin out parts of your systems to other platforms. That's the main problem you have with Ruby. And especially in telephony, where it's harder to scale stuff because of you're not just doing web requests, so you can also put load balancer in front, done. But you need to figure out a way to handle your communication between the FreeSWITCH servers and the Ruby processes in a scaling way. Some of those parts will end up being slow, and you need to figure out a way to make them faster. Also because, to be honest, the performance of FreeSWITCH has gotten, and also Asterisk, to be honest, has gotten so good right now that a single Ruby process is having trouble keeping up if you're running at full capacity. Like, you can run 600 channels easily on a 2-core, 4-gig box on DigitalOcean. Adhearsion will croak at around 400. So there's some things where you need to either scale differently or branch out to an entirely different language. But Ruby is great, and it's a great first language to learn too.
So, can you explain? You were talking about the bridge. How come you just didn't use for Janus? Didn't use the SIP connector?
So essentially, it's a matter of simplicity. The SIP connector in Janus itself is a separate process that has to be run, and it works very well, and it worked well for us at the beginning of the project. Then I realized that I could just use Verto because everything else was Verto. So essentially, we cut out a part, and also it's far easier to get connectivity to work correctly because each server transparently sees the other as just someone calling in from their own channel. So Janus sees the FreeSWITCH call as just a FreeSWITCH client, and and just a Janus client like it was a browser, and FreeSWITch sees Janus sees FreeSWITch as someone dialing in through the Janus SFU. So essentially, that just simplified the architecture. It's just a matter of having less moving parts. It's more predictable. It doesn't crash. We don't have any media transcoding in the path. We don't have anything strange in there. The SIP connector works perfectly. So I'm just saying that for this particular application, we ended up using the Virtu, just because WebRTC, it's all WebRTC. So we're staying in WebRTC. That's essentially it.
All right, Luca, thank you for coming in today. We appreciate you showing up, and good luck on the upcoming release. We hope to see it by ClueCon.
Oh, yeah. Now I have to release it, right?
You do have to release it. Back to you, Ken.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, Luca and Michael. So, hey, guys, don't forget, ClueCon's coming up very, very rapidly. That discount code Josh mentioned at the beginning of the video, that's only good till the end of tomorrow. So you guys want to get in and get that in if you haven't got your ClueCon tickets. Don't forget, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and if you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button down below, and click that. Once you do that, you'll see the little bell icon there. Click that. You'll get the notifications when we're doing these things live in the future. You'll also get notifications when we post new how-to videos and, cooking with Fred and various things like that. So you guys check that out. We'll see you next week. Have a good week, guys.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central. Keep up with the latest happenings by subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit us at FreeSWITCH.com.